when I think back to my childhood, some of my most fun times that we had was the 4th of July family reunion, and so I'm glad that we're having the Glisson reunion on the 4th of July weekend. We always went down to State Park and got to swim in that ice cold pool that was fed by a spring. That's where Daddy taught us to swim. He would get in the water, and I can remember even when we couldn't swim, Dad would wait down at the end of the diving board, and I can remember jumping off of the diving board and couldn't swim a lick, but I didn't have any worries because I knew Daddy was there and he wouldn't let me drown, and so that was how I learned to swim. Another one of my favorite childhood memories was on Christmas, when we would always get together on Christmas Eve, and almost without fail, we would have to wait on Uncle Alton and his family to get there, because they always went to the Cossey's family reunion, and so we all sat around and griped until they finally got there so we could open our present. And most of the time I do mean present, because there was one, if we were lucky, maybe 2 or 3. And another of my favorite childhood memories that we didn't do very often because it was in West Texas, but I can remember that if school let out or was during the Christmas break or something and we had an ice storm or a snowstorm, they would hook a big trailer, flatbed trailer on the back of the tractor and pull us around in it. And it was probably very dangerous, but that was the nearest thing to a sled that we ever had. I guess those are my 3 probably favorite childhood memories.
Oh, I think our parents had, I'll get teary over this, because they, from the time I can remember, you know, they took us to church, they prayed for us, they read the Bible with us, they taught us, and it just, you know, I know that I've had such a blessed life from the time I was a little girl to today, and it's always been very awesome and really real, and I'm just so grateful for that. That was the biggest blessing that they gave us.
Most of my memories on the farm was down at Grandma's, because that was where we lived. We moved there in midterm of my 1st grade. We had moved from a little bitty 3-room house on the Wiggins place to my grandma's, and we thought she had a huge house, because it had well, it actually only had 2 bedrooms, because Mother and Daddy used a room between the kitchen and the living room that was probably really a dining room. I know that the kitchen was so small that we had to have the refrigerator in the bedroom. So that was where most of my memories originated.
It was a lot of fun. Doris and I got in a lot of trouble. We lived a lot of that time on our grandmother's farm, and she had about 160 acres, and we wandered all over it and had little creeks and things, so we'd get out. Mother'd always tell us don't wade in the creeks because she was afraid we'd get some disease, and so I'd tell Doris, well, we'll just do it, we'll get a spanking for it, but it'll be okay, it'll be fun while it lasted. So we'd just go ahead and do it. And Nancy was 6 years younger, almost 6 years younger than me, so she didn't get as involved in that as we did, but we did a lot of things like that together. Living on the farm, you could climb trees and get in the barns and all kinds of things. We had a good time.
I use this all the time, and I cannot think without when I think of my mother and Daddy, I always think of a quote that Daddy used, and it's the one thing I would definitely pass on to my children. Is Daddy always said when we started to say something ugly about someone, or we wanted to down someone, make them feel bad or something, or we just talked about them, he'd always come in the room and he'd say, now you girls, if you can't say something good, don't say anything. But the ones, and all my children and grandchildren and all of you listen to this because it's words of wisdom. There but by the grace of God go I. And to me, that is the one thing that is important. We are all who we are because of the way we were raised. We could be a lot different. We could have things a whole lot worse. And when you see someone that's in prison, which we've all certainly experienced, or you see someone that's down and out, or you see a beggar on the street, just remember, there but by the grace of God go I. The things that I would tell you to do, and it kind of involves not to do too. I think that communication is by far the most important thing. I will say that I think, well, Bernil and I used to laugh all the time about why we stayed married for so many years, because when all of you kids were young, and we decided that whoever wanted the divorce had to take all 5 kids. And so that kept us together because neither one of us wanted to do that. But on the serious side, I think the main thing is when you have a fight, don't let it, when that fight is over, let it be over. Don't keep digging it up, bringing it back and saying, remember in 1942 you did this or you did that, or in the year 2011.
But so do you think that you guys were good at that or not good at that?
I think that we were pretty good at that. We usually, when we had a fight, when it was over, and we didn't rehash past issues. One of the things, the main important thing that I would say to you is, in Daddy's case, because he became ill, and we knew that unless God intervened, that he was going to be leaving before I did. And we were able to talk about that. We talked about it very openly. We made plans for it. He bought the car I drive because it was what I wanted. We bought the house I live in because it was what I wanted and what we needed. And so we knew that I was going to be taken care of, and I had actually picked it out. But it's more than just the physical things that you do. And it's really, I think, kind of a blessing if you know that you're fixing to be separated, because you do have an opportunity to look forward, to really be honest and what was important to you. And I can honestly say that we did have some rough patches in our life. Never talked about divorce, I thought about murder very frequently, but I never made any real plans. But seriously, I think that just to be able to talk about life together, and I would say, do not let one of you control the other one. Make your decisions together. And we weren't very good at that. And I think everybody in this house knows that Bernil ruled the roost. Now, if he was here, he'd say he was henpecked, but every one of y'all know that is not the truth. He was not henpecked. We did what Bernil wanted to do. And I had a good life. I'm not saying this. And I have as good life as I have today because Bernil was Bernil. And he planned for my future. And I'm very grateful for that. And another thing is, above everything else, do keep Christ in your life. It is very important.
Okay. Good answer. Oh, I haven't.
Do something that you love, and don't worry about knowing everything in advance. Just do what you know to do right now, what your heart tells you to do, and pray about it. And then it'll fall into place as you move along. And I've always told my kids that it's okay to make mistakes if you learn from it. And so, you know, you try things that may not work, but you learn. If you learn from it, that's a really good lesson. And let it go and go on from where you are. Y'all might tell me something. We just had a lot of fun together because we were only 2 years apart, and so. I know, maybe you don't know about Cheryl Scott's rattlesnake vet one time. We lived on a farm, and we had to go get water. We didn't have water in the house, and so we went up to the neighbors to get water, and it was around a little fence around a tree, and she got inside to turn the faucet on, and I looked down, and there was a rattlesnake right at her feet. And don't ask me how, but I went in and told the neighbors, and I don't even remember how she got out, but that snake never moved. It never made a move toward her, and it was right at her feet. And that was time for them to get a gun and come out and kill it. So we had a lot of...
Did they get me out of the way first?
I don't remember. Well, yeah, they didn't shoot her. It was probably tempting, but they didn't.
I remember one time, before we moved to Grandma's, most of y'all know that we actually grew up on our grandmother's farm, but we moved a lot of times, a bunch of times before we moved down to Grandma's. And one time when we lived at the Wiggins place, that we called it, it was the one we lived in, when we got electricity, that was really exciting. But we had gone out the day before down by a little tank. It's not a pond in Texas, it's a tank. And we had made us a playhouse down there the day before, and we always just took a knife and drew it in the floor, you know, on the ground. This is your bedroom, this is the kitchen, blah, 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 you know. And Betty Jo, Mother had this one pan that she always cooked oatmeal in, and Betty had taken it down for only God knows why, to the playhouse that night. You remember this? And she left it she left it down there, and Daddy came into our bedroom about 4:30 probably in the morning and asked where the oatmeal pan was. And he made Betty get out of bed, go down to the tank, and pick up that oatmeal pan and bring it back to the house, because that was the oatmeal pan. And of course the only songs we knew were out of the Baptist hymnal. Well, actually it was the Broadman hymnal then. And Betty was singing some song, and she was climbing over the barbed wire fence, and she got hung on the barbed wire fence and stuck her hand, and the next words in the song was, "Oh God," and she screamed, "Oh God," and Daddy spanked her for taking the Lord's name in vain. And I was about 5 when that happened, but I still remember it. That was something y'all probably didn't know about Betty.
I even have a scar on my leg from the barbed wire fence.
Yeah. Betty, you go first.
He was very loving. He was very, that was an example of how he could be overly disciplined about things, over discipline us. But he was so loving that you didn't even realize he'd done that, because he always let us know that we were very loved. And I remember Nancy would sit for hours in his lap and comb his hair, and he'd just sit there and close his eyes, and Aunt Nancy would comb his hair, and he was, just real patient most of the time, so he was very loving. I remember that.
I think one of the things that I remember most about Daddy was, of course, as y'all know, I am the middle child. We have no brothers. And so back in the days on the farm, we did everything. I mean, there was no cotton pickers except blonde-headed kids. And so we did everything that had to be done. And we were as well off financially as anyone that we knew or anyone that we were around. But because Daddy was a farmer, it all ceased in the winter. There was nothing coming in, and no vegetables to sell, not anything else. And when Daddy just needed one person to help him, generally it was me. And I think that was God's way of preparing, because I truly believe that God knows all things. And he knew that Mother was going to go before he did. And Daddy and I think, had a special bond. And I used to go trapping animals with him in the wintertime. And it was cruel, but it was necessary. And he had these steel traps that we would go up on what we called mountains out south of Abilene. And we would set the traps, and then the next day or 2 days later we would run the traps. And the poor little animals were usually caught with the foot in the trap, and Daddy would shoot it. And we'd take it home, and he would skin it and stretch it, literally cut the skin, the fur part off of the animals, usually raccoons, foxes, and things like that. And he would cut the skin off, and he had these boards that he stretched the skin all out on these boards and tacked them on there. And when they would all dry out, he would take them into Abilene and sell them. And that's what we lived on in the wintertime, in addition to the so I think that the things that I learned from Daddy, and he was very loving, but he worked probably harder than anybody I've ever known in my life. The only time I can ever remember Daddy setting would be to sit down in front of the radio, because there was no TV, on Saturday night and listen to the fights. He loved he loved Joe Louis and all of those fighters back in those days, and he'd sit there and listen on the radio to the fight. But every once in a while we would be out in the field working, and we'd get down to the end of it, and he would say, you girls sit down. And we'd sit down, and he'd say, okay, when we get back to the end of the road, we'll go to the house. And if you'd like to, we'll take you into Abilene tonight to the Blue Sox ball game. That was the
Baseball.
yeah, it was baseball. What do you call it? Amateur. Yeah, it wasn't even a minor league, I don't think. But I remember one of the players' name was Stubby Greer, and he was everybody's hero. But they would bring us into town to go to the Blue Sox, Abilene Blue Sox baseball game. And that was one of the things I remember. That Daddy, he always called us his three little pigs, three bears, or three boys. That's what he called Betty and Nancy and I all the time.
His mother she was fun. And all of our friends loved her, and I can't remember hardly any Sunday when all of our friends or somebody came home with us.
Do you remember the first time you remember her peeing in her pants from laughing?
Oh goodness, no, not the first time. I remember many times. but she, she just, I've never been around anybody, I think, that loved life so much. She just loved life, and she loved people, and the thing was, it didn't matter if it was the black sheep of the family that nobody else wanted to be around. She just loved them. I've always said I think she's the person most that reminds me of what Jesus would be like, because it was just unconditional love. She loved everybody, and it was genuine. I'm not sure, but I think Aunt Corley, Daddy's cousin, I think she might have introduced him. That was Mother's brother, Alton, was married to Corley. I don't know if that was before or after Mother and Daddy, but
It was after.
But anyway, I think that's how they were introduced. And they knew some of his relatives and that sort of thing. So they didn't know each other very long.
I was fixing to ask, did they court for very long before they got married?
No, it was a short courtship, I think, just months, I think.
But they were both older. I think
Yeah,
Daddy
but
was
then-
27 or
And
26 or
Mother
something.
I think Mother was 24 and he was 27.
Yeah.
He was 4 years old.
Yeah, he was 40
Okay,
years
28
old.
then, but
That's
for
pretty
that,
old for
for
that.
them,
For that age, that was
very
very old. And they did, the funny thing is that Mother and Daddy were both born in Mahia, Texas. But Daddy moved away almost immediately. And I never thought of him.
I didn't think he was.
No, he wasn't. He was born out at Iberis, the same place I was.
Out near Abilene.
Yeah, near Abilene. But they did date very seriously, but I mean, very briefly. But back in those days, the families were all very intermingled. Because, think about it, there wasn't cars. You didn't go off. You took, like, growing up, I probably hadn't been to Dallas 3 times maybe in my whole life, you know, because you didn't have way and back, especially when Mother and Daddy married. They married in 35. Mother was born in 13 and Daddy in 9. And so transportation, well, it wasn't anything like it is today. And so you had to marry somebody that was there in the community. And that's the reason why everybody was married to somebody else's cousin. Everybody was married to somebody else's sister.
What's wrong with this man?
And, no, not your cousin. It wasn't in our kids will know it, and our great grandkids will know it. There was 10 siblings, 5 boys and 5 girls. Our granddaddy's name was John T. Thornton. We did not know him. He had died before we came along. I think Mother was like maybe 14 or something, and so we never had a granddaddy because Daddy had deserted him, and so we never had a granddaddy. And then we had Grandma, but Grandma was a good woman. She always had us to do things for her. Y'all will get a kick out of this. Grandma did snuff because we had an uncle that when he was just a baby had fallen out of the rocking chair into the fireplace. And he was burnt severely on his face and had a black patch like Long John Silver over one of his eyes. And so when he was a baby and had done this, she started dipping snuff to keep her awake at night so she could take care of the baby. And this is kind of gross, but we did it on more than one occasion. Grandma always wore an apron that had a pocket on it, and she kept a little knife about this long, her snuff can, which was about this big and about that big around, and in this pocket. And sometimes she would say, I need a new, you girls need to go with me. I need a new dipping, what did she call it? Dipstick? No, it wasn't a dipstick. I don't know what she called it, but she needed a new thing to dip her stuff with. So there was this little willow tree down in the pasture, and we would walk down to the pasture, and she'd break off a limb till she found a little twig until she found one that was just right. And she'd take her knife out and cut it off the length she wanted it, and then she'd give it to us to chew on it until we got it the right consistency, because she didn't have any teeth. Well, she had them, but they were saved for Sunday. And when she went to church, she didn't wear her teeth around the house, but she could clean a cob of corn real easy without them. But we would chew on her dipping snuff stick until it got where she could use it, and she always kept it inside her snuff bucket. So she always had it. She was, I understand that this might be very Germany, if that's such a word, that especially back in those days, Grandma, she was sweet, but I wouldn't say she was loving.
No, she was just quiet.
She was very quiet, and she wasn't affectionate.
No,
At all.
but
She wasn't
did
mean to us. I'm not saying
She
that.
did a lot of things though for us. I mean, then this was Depression days or just after, and she would. We lived on the farm, and so the feed came in feed sacks, and they printed them with pretty patterns on them. And so that's what our clothes were made out of. And she didn't have patterns or anything. She had a sewing machine, and she'd cut out our clothes and make them from these feed sacks. And we wore them to school. I mean, they were pretty, you know.
We wore them to church too, but the thing, it was a real big deal. I guess we kind of took times about who got the new feed sack to make your dress out of. And so when it was our time to get, we would go into the feed store and pick out our own sack for our next dress to be made out of. And you know, those are precious memories. They really are. One of my earliest memories is standing on the arm of the machine where you, and Grandma measuring where to put the hem in my dress, you know, because that was, she didn't have to bend over or anything. And I can remember that when we lived on the ranch. We called it Grandma Fletcher's. And so I was 4, Betty was in the 1st grade then. And that's one of my clearest first memories was that. The nicest thing that I ever thought my grandma did for me is one day we were sitting on the front porch, and she always had a rocking chair out on the front porch, and she would rock in that rocking chair. And she was sitting out there one day, and I was out there with her, and she took her little knife out of her pocket and peeled a pecan and gave me half of it. And as far as I know, that's the only thing my grandmother ever gave me, was a half of a pecan.
And the dresses.
Well, she made those. Yes, she did. But she was a very quiet woman.
And she was extremely frightened of thunderstorms. And so
oh, Lord.
whenever there was a thunderstorm, I don't care if it was midnight or whatever, we had a storm cellar, and somebody was going to go with her to that storm cellar if we didn't all go. And she slept down there a lot of times, and she had a feather bed in there. And there were scorpions in there, but we weren't afraid of them, you know, we'd just sleep there with them. But anyway, one time I remember there was a real bad hailstorm and lightning and thunder. And it was at about 2 in the afternoon, and she couldn't get to that cellar. And she paced the floor. I mean, I really felt sorry for her. She was so scared. But what I was going to say, but she didn't like to be by herself at night either. So because we were older, we'd go to church or whatever, or we'd see neighbors or whatever, and she always had Nancy stay with her. So Nancy was really close to her because she was just a little girl, but for some reason that was okay if somebody stayed with her. And they spent a lot of time. I think Nancy kind of has her personality in a way, in that she's, you know, quieter and but anyway, I know they had really, really good times together and spent a lot of time together just because of that.
I started a while ago, Mindy, when we stopped. I just take, like, real briefly to tell you, my idea of a typical morning on the farm was that we would probably wake up about 4:30 or so. And I don't know, you might have been older than me, gone and milked in the morning, but Mother and Daddy took care of a lot of the milking in the morning time. But we had a separator, which none of y'all have an idea what a separator is. Look it up on Google. But it separated the cream from the milk. And you would save the cream to make your butter and everything. The milk, we drank it before we separated it. We drank 100% milk.
Is it better than the milk you taste?
Oh yeah. And the milk part of it, we would usually sit out on the back porch and let it clabber and feed that to the hogs. But then we always had to clean the separator before we went to school, and that was no easy chore, because it had a thing about this big around that you poured the milk into, and then it had a spout here for the cream and a spout here for the milk. And somehow it would separate it and run it off. But then you had to clean it afterwards, and so you'd have to put your rag in there and pull it all the way through to get it all loose and everything. And Betty, were you in high school yet? Or do you remember? We were cleaning that morning, and we were already dressed for school, and you spilled the water on me.
I don't remember it.
You
Oh,
don't?
when I got burned?
Yeah.
Oh. I don't know.
And one morning, Betty, we had no running water in the house. So we drew it up from the well that was in the backyard, brought it in the house, set it on the kerosene stove, let it get hot, and then we would wash our dishes. And so that was, and Betty was, she usually did the washing and I did the drying. And this particular morning, I guess it must have been in the wintertime because we had on very heavy socks. And she dropped, the handle broke on the tea kettle or something, and this hot boiling water hit her foot. And when she or mother or somebody pulled the sock off, her skin came with the sock. And I mean, she was burnt. But we didn't go to the doctor. I don't know what they did. Probably put butter on it. I don't know what they did. When we stuck a thorn or a piece of metal or cut ourselves or anything, they'd take us, put us out under the kerosene and let it run on our foot to disinfect it. That was all we did for it. But a typical day, I was going to say this, we'd get up early in the morning, get ready for school, and the school bus would come by on its way first, and in about 30 minutes, we knew it was going to come back by, so we had to be down at the end of the road to catch the bus on the way it came back. One thing y'all don't know about Betty is that back in those days, you could stay home from school to help bring the crops in. And Betty Jo was so embarrassed because she was out there in the field pulling cotton when the bus would go by, and she would hear the bus, and the minute that she could see it starting around the corner, she would lay down flat on the ground in the cotton row where they couldn't see her out in the cotton patch. She was so embarrassed about having to do it. But we'd get up, we'd go to school, we came in, changed clothes, and went to the field almost every day. We went to the cart, we went down in the pasture, brought the cows up, went out to the garden, out to the barn and milked them, gathered the eggs, swapped the hogs. We did everything that y'all just read about. And I think that's real sad because except for things like this, people nowadays have no idea. And really that
Want
at
to live your
least.
whole life and you haven't done it.
Not really, because I've done a lot of the things I wanted to do when Ralph
No
and I
skydiving.
No, Doris might be. She's more like Mother about that, more of a daredevil. But I just enjoy friends and just being able to do what I want to do.
You ever ridden a motorcycle?
No, not even with my son.
You used to have a horse or ride horses or something. There's a picture of you with this horse that's taller than you.
That horse was on a farm that my dad leased or whatever. We lived there when I was a little girl, but that picture was taken right before Roy and I were married. And we would go back out there all those years. We'd go back out there and visit. It was two ladies that were never married and their mother.
Grandma.
And they ran that ranch. And so we, for years, it was like 6 or 7 when we left there, but even after I was out of high school, we'd still go out there and visit. We'd go out and visit them, and that's where the picture of that horse was.
But did you ever ride the horse?
A little bit, not
What was the
very much.
horse's name?
I have no idea.
Mr.
I have
Red?
a question. I have another question. What was your favorite memory, Aunt Betty, of me when I came out that summer to visit with Dwayne, with Granny and Bobo?
Oh my goodness, who knows? I enjoyed that you were there. I really did. It was fun. But I don't remember details about it. I'm sure there'd be some better things if I knew about them, but I don't know about them.
Sailing away in the sailboat.
You want to confess anything?
No.
No.
Not until they're sitting in that chair.
With a gun to my head.
The one thing I have done so many things that I never dreamed I would ever do. I mean, just, y'all got a little bit of an idea of what it was like when we grew up. But we were we saw electricity coming into being on the farm areas. We saw television, telephone. When we got our first telephone,
Who's the first person you called?
well, a mother called somebody. I'm quite sure. I don't remember.
Oh,
the
we
first.
had a party line.
How many rings on your party line?
8
Oh,
people.
mother, she listened to every conversation that was on. Every conversation, she would hold her hand over the speaker and.
How many rings was your
And then
party
she'd
line?
go. and everybody had different rings. That's how you knew if you were
How many
supposed to
rings was
answer
yours, Doug asked?
Uh,
How many rings was y'all's?
I think it was 2 longs and a short.
Okay. I think grandmother and granddaddy Watson's was 3 shorts, wasn't it?
I don't remember that, but it would go ring, 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 or it would go ling, 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 ring, and so you had to wait until it rung a time or two to see if it was your ring. Well, Mother could get from the cow pen into the living room if she heard the phone ringing before they picked it up. And she would listen to everybody. And of course it was all kinfolk, so that made it even better. But it was fun having that party line. You knew what was going on. You knew when somebody was mad at their husbands. It was fun.
How old were you when you got your first TV?
Got what? How were
I was in high school and it was black and white and about this big and just full of snow. You couldn't even see the picture.
And yeah, I can remember that they used to, this I do miss, every morning. I think it was 6 o'clock, they would turn it on and they would have a prayer and sing the national anthem. Every morning. It'd go off at midnight and they would sing the national anthem as it was going off the air. Every day. I do remember that. But it was, yeah, Betty was probably in the 10th grade or so when we got it, something like that. And then, of course, to go on a trip, and another thing about Daddy, that when in '53, Daddy bought a brand new Ford Fairlane, and I think it was like $3,000 or $4,000. But Daddy, another thing that he always said, pride cometh before a fall. And he did not want to brag about anything. And for about 2 weeks, we would leave the house early and park that car behind the church so nobody would see it. Because he thought that he would be a proud man if he drove a new car to church.
Internet and especially Facebook and those kinds of things have been the most detrimental. There's a lot of good things that come from, because you can communicate like that. But I think the detrimental part of it is that people can say whatever they want and make any accusation they want, and everybody believes it's the truth, and it's not.
What do you think?
What's your favorite?
Favorite what?
Invention or
Technology.
technology or whatever. I
Think
sort of
that.
think, I would say, I think TV really. I mean, it's especially when it first came, it connected us with each other, and that's the good part about the technology is where it's good and bad, but like Doris said, you had to marry the people that lived around you because you didn't know anybody else, you know.
That's why we're all funny.
Yeah.
And now you can just do it over the internet.
Oh, Aunt Betty, would you like to talk a little bit more about
No. I'm not
Talk a little bit more.
interested.
Would you like to expound on that?
No.
I think the best thing, the very best thing is probably electricity, because it has made life so much easier. I came to do our washing. We used to, Grandma and Mother you had to heat the water in big black pots over wood and wait until it got hot, which took half a day nearly to get it hot enough. And then you had to put your clothes in there and with lye soap that you'd made when you killed the last hog, and slosh it up and down to wash your clothes. Then you'd have to dig them out of this hot water, and as soon as your hands could stand it, you had to wring them out, put them over in some more hot water and rinse them. We finally managed to get a wringer type washing machine where you could put them in there and they'd agitate and wash and everything, and you could rinse them, but it had a roller, and you would take the clothes and stick them between the roller and turn the handle to get the water out of them. And one day our grandmother was putting clothes in there, and she got her hand in there and in between the two rollers, and it crushed her hand real bad. Of course, she didn't go to the doctor, Bob poured some collar oil on it and went back to the cotton field. But anyway, I think electricity, I mean, just look right now, what wouldn't be going on if we didn't have electricity? So I definitely think electricity. I think one of the worst things, yes, I own one. Yes, I'm glad I own one. But I think the saddest thing that has been invented is the cell phone. It really breaks my heart to see a family with 3 or 4 kids going into a restaurant. It is obviously a family meal, and every one of them, from 2 years old to great grandma, is sitting there playing on the cell phones instead of being with the family. I think that is really sad, because in reality what you're saying is what is on this phone is a lot more important than you are. And I think it's really sad. I think it is. I lived 70 years without one, and I managed just fine. So I really hate that. That's one of the things that really bothers me.
I'm very blessed to have 3 children and I think 8 grandsons. Unfortunately, no granddaughters, but I do have 2 great granddaughters and more great grandsons. It's just the boys are just taking over. But I'm so blessed to have each one of them, and I love them all very much. And I know that every one of them love me very much. So that's a real blessing.
The greatest blessing on earth has to be family. Nothing else is as important as family. And I am most grateful for everything I have in life, for my Christian heritage, because someone taught me about the Lord and taught me to love Him. I'm not always the person that I need to be. Very seldom am I the person that I need to be, or that the Lord would desire me to be. But I do love Him, and that is the heritage that I want to pass on to my children and my great-grandchildren. I have 5 kids and 4 in-laws whom I love dearly. I have 13 grandchildren and am soon to have 8 great-grandchildren, and that is such a blessing.